and we are going to drain the swamp.
Immigration and crime.
Can the woke leftist elites cling to power against the will of the majority?
We believe in democracy. We serve the people. We do not rule over them.
Den regering vi har haft, den har inte stöd av folkmajoriteten. Då är det dags att vi får en majoritet i Sveriges riksdag.
To bring the Brexit message, the message that you can beat the establishment.
Drain the swamp, fight the establishment, return the government to the pure people. Messages such as this are central components to the nature of populist movements. Some view these movements as a pure form of democracy, others as a threat to the liberal democratic order itself. No matter how one views populism, it cannot be ignored that in recent years we have seen a prevalent spike in the amount and success of populist parties in Western democracies. This has been especially apparent in European countries, with numerous populist parties, many of whom hold far-right ideologies, gaining significant electoral success. Populist leaders and movements have been around for a while, but how can we account for the recent uptick in support for them?
Hi, my name is Owen Coppola, and I am a student studying the rise and nature of populist movements. Obviously, there are a myriad of different factors that go into why a given populist movement becomes successful, but I specifically want to focus on how the introduction of new media forms can prove to be an effective vessel for populism. In this video, I will examine historical trends in which the introduction of new media correlated to a rise in populism, before examining how the introduction of social media in contemporary times may be having similar effects. Through an analysis of how populism functions in relation to the media, paired with an example of how Germany's AfD party utilizes new media, I will aim to account for how the introduction of new media can correlate to a rise in populism, and therefore why perhaps we have seen such a spike in populism during recent years. Before we begin to delve into how exactly the introduction of new media can correlate to more success for populist movements, it would be helpful to first give a definition of what populism actually is. Mudd and Caldwasser define populism as a thin-centered ideology that considers society to be ultimately separated into two homogeneous and antagonistic groups, the pure people versus the corrupt elite, and which argues that politics should be an expression of the volonté générale, or the general will of the people. Now, the main thing to look at in this definition is how populism seeks to create a divide between the pure people and the corrupt elite. Creating this divide is essential to the populist politicians' appeal. And the techniques many of these actors use to achieve this is how we can first begin to relate the nature of populism to the media. In order to create this divide, populist actors oftentimes rely on appealing to an audience's emotions. And as Canavan tells us, not only do populists specialize in action, rarely attempting deep thought, but their characteristic is a mixture of homespun common sense and emotional appeals. The populist leader must be able to tap into an audience's emotions if they seek to create the type of mobilization associated with their movement. And this is important regarding how the introduction of new media can prove to be beneficial for populist movements, as new media forms can carry with them a more direct line of communication, and therefore a more personalized medium through which leaders can disseminate their message. Evidence of this historically is how the introduction of radio as a mass communication medium in the 1930s brought with it the rise of populist actors. Through this medium, actors such as Father Coughlin, Huey Long, and Gerald L.K. Smith were able to gain millions of followers through promoting these types of populist messages through the radio.
If you will rise in your places and pledge with me to restore America to the Americans.
The only way you'll ever be able to feed the balance of the people is to make that man come back and bring back some of that grub he ain't got no business with.
To the corrupt, seething politicians of America, that's the big...
Now, these kinds of messages are deeply rooted in emotion in the populist sentiment, and had they been spread through the more traditional print media of the time, they would have had nowhere near the same effect, nor the same reach, as illustrated by Father Coughlin having as many as 40 million weekly listeners at the height of his success. Now, another framework through which we can examine how changes in the media landscape may correlate to a rise in populism comes from Benjamin Moffat. While Moffat does note that the rise in contemporary populism is intimately related to shifts in the media landscape, he contends that another important factor to consider is how contemporary politics have become mediatized. And this basically refers to the idea that contemporary politics are increasingly influenced, shaped, and colonized by media logic. Now, Moffat basically contends that certain phenomena in the media landscape, and how this has in turn brought with it the mediatization of politics, proves to be extremely well suited to the nature of populist movements. He outlines certain mediatized elements of contemporary politics related to this, including simplification, polarization, intensification, personalization, visualization and stereotypization, emotionalization and an anti-establishment attitude, negativism, sports-based dramatization, and the triumph of style over substance, the prioritization of conflict, and a focus on scandals. These elements of the media landscape perfectly align with the populist style, as populist messages are simple,
We will make America great again.
emotional,
Il n'y a rien pour nous de plus beau que la France. Il n'y a rien pour nous de plus grand que la France. Il n'y a rien pour nous de plus utile au monde que la France.
and rooted in conflict.
Of justice, no more common fisheries policy, no more being talked down to, no more being bullied, no more Guy Verhofstadt. I mean...
Moffat's framework surrounding how contemporary politics have become mediatized give us an additional explanation as to why populists may currently be having so much success. Moffat is, however, hesitant to explicitly conflate changes in the media technological landscape with the change in populism, and cites a lack of research into Web 2.0 as proof that we cannot immediately attribute the rise of social media as being the sole factor behind the rise of populism. Now, this I would agree with. However, I think through using his mediatization framework, paired with the notion of how historically developments in technological communication have correlated to a rise in populism, we can begin to analyze how and why exactly the populist message may be further strengthened through social media. And in order to effectively test this theory, we're going to take a look at some of the communication/social media strategies of Germany's AfD party. The AfD party was founded in 2013 and made history in 2017 when it became the first party to enter the German Bundestag since reunification. The party has risen to prominence with its extremely far-right agenda, with policies including a heightened sense of German nationalism, paired with a strong opposition to immigration. Although they have held seats in the Bundestag since 2017, and currently hold the second most seats in the Bundestag, they have never been allowed to enter a governing coalition, because of the firewall put in place against them by other German parties. This firewall put in place against the AfD in the German political arena stems from the idea that they are extremist or even threatening to democracy. For some time, there has been a concerted effort to keep the AfD party out, and this could perhaps be a reason behind them being one of the first German parties to truly adopt alternative platforms for messaging. They have also been the most successful German party on social media, as shown by this video showcasing some of their social media techniques.
Mittagsmann am Sonntag haben 38% der 18- bis 24-Jährigen in Thüringen ihr Kreuz bei der AfD gemacht. In Sachsen waren es 31%.
Similarly to how in the 1930s many populist figures were able to gain an audience through the introduction of a new communication medium, the AfD were able to do this through gaining an immense following on social media platforms, and especially TikTok. This is especially evident through the fact that according to 2023 statistics, AfD politicians made up 4 of the 5 most followed German politicians on TikTok. This direct line of communication to an audience falls in line with the elements of emotional appeal populist movements seek to invoke. And as Minucci tells us, in the same way populist figures of the past found an effective medium through the radio, populist figures today find a similarly effective medium to disseminate these emotionally charged messages through online communication. The frequent use of alternative online platforms by the AfD also relates to how they and other populist movements have a tendency to constantly attack mainstream media outlets. This is because populist movements oftentimes portray mainstream media as being a part of the quote-unquote corrupt elite they seek to differentiate themselves from. And in many cases, including the case of the AfD, they accuse these outlets of being biased against them. Therefore, populists having this more direct line of communication gives them the ability to sidestep any criticism they may endure from mainstream media. And as Moffat tells us, populist actors have benefited from the ability to reach the people in a low-cost and efficient manner that sidesteps traditional media channels, while at the same time appearing as more direct, immediate, and accountable to their people. Now, when examining the style of the AfD's content on social media, we can find stark examples of how they effectively mediatize their content to fit the needs of the platform. The AFD has been effective in their ability to tailor their content to meet the needs of social media, as through their short-form videos, among other things, they've been able to capture audiences through content that falls in line with the aspects of mediatization in politics that Moffat tells us about.
They very often not talk about politics itself, about complex issues. They transport emotions, joy, positive messages.
Verändern wir gemeinsam Deutschland.
And what you see basically the result of 15 years of investing into social media.
They use relatively simple, straightforward content to invoke extreme emotion in their audience, and also oftentimes seek to foster conflict or discontent through the use of divisive headlines and videos, meant to create outrage in their audience. I think another benefit that social media offers the AFD and populist parties as a whole is that it effectively allows them to sidestep any controversy these movements oftentimes find themselves in. The AFD party has constantly found themselves at the center of controversy, such as there being leaks linking AFD officials to an extreme remigration program in which both illegal and legal migrants would be forcefully deported, their association with neo-Nazi groups, and even a classification by German officials that they are an extremist organization. An effective way the AFD and other populist movements can sidestep controversy is through this direct line of communication social media offers, as they can put out content themselves with their own framing and still reach a mass audience. The AFD has also even attracted controversy with some of their social media content, including this controversial video they posted depicting their concept of remigration, along with the Germans in the video bearing a strong resemblance to the Aryan race ideas of the country's Nazi past. The AFD was once again able to sidestep this controversy, and this relates to their further understanding of social platforms, as they care less about their content being non-contentious or of a good quality, and more so aim to flood the zone with frequent, oftentimes controversial content. The populist sentiment appears to be spreading like wildfire across Europe and the world, and how the introduction of social media has changed the overall political landscape is undoubtedly a driving factor behind this. It is also the global nature of social media that is allowing this to happen, as platforms such as X, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram facilitate the rapid spread of this type of content across geopolitical borders. Through an examination of how the introduction of new media and changes in the media landscape connect to populism, as well as how Germany's AFD party utilizes social media, we can perhaps begin to account for why populist parties have become increasingly popular with the rise of social media, and what it is about these platforms that makes their messages especially appealing. On a surface level, populism may appear to be a pure form of democracy, but when we actually investigate some of the messages associated with these movements, it is apparent that many of them threaten the liberal democratic order itself. The populist storm continues to grow, and even in a country such as Germany, where the AFD has been effectively frozen out, their continued electoral success is beginning to cause the firewall put in place against them to erode. Perhaps there has to be some changes in the ways non-populist actors conduct their media presence in order to combat this growing populist storm. However, as we have seen, this can be tough due to the ways in which the current media landscape favors the populist message. With the rise of social media, populism appears to be here to stay. And if we seek to get back to more pragmatic political movements, there will likely have to be some changes in the media strategies employed by non-populist actors.